Have you ever wondered what would make a priest wake up screaming with his hand burned and swollen? What could a man see in a dream so real that his skin would peel off days later? And what truth could be so terrifying that it would exhaust him for weeks just from witnessing it? Throughout the 19th century, the streets of Turin were filled with orphaned boys, children of the Industrial Revolution, who had nowhere to go and no one to guide them. Many ended up in prison, some ended up dead, and one priest saw exactly where their souls were heading if nothing changed. His name was Giovanni Melchiorre Bosco. Born August 16th, 1815, in a tiny hamlet called Becci near Turin, Italy. The world would come to know him as Don Bosco, the father of street children, the man who could see what others could not. But before we continue, if you value documented Catholic history like this, subscribe. It is the best way to support our work. Also comment from which city you are hearing this from. Now, this script is researched and factual, using sources from the original biographical memoirs compiled by the Salesians themselves, documented testimonies from John Bosco, who lived 7 years at the oratory and gave formal sworn statements, and from the 40, Dreams manuscript ordered preserved by Pope Pius IX himself. These are not folklore, these are documented church records. Now, back to the information. Don Bosco lost his father Francesco at age 2. Pneumonia took him in 1817. His mother Margaret raised 3 boys alone on a failing farm in Piedmont. She was illiterate but wise. She taught young John to pray by watching her kneel in the dirt after 16-hour days. No books, no school, just work and the Our Father whispered in the dark. At 9 years old, John had his first vision. He saw himself surrounded by wild boys cursing and fighting. He tried to stop them with his fists. Then a man appeared, dignified and radiant. Beside him stood a woman more beautiful than the sun. She told him he would turn wolves into lambs, not with blows, with love. She said she would be his teacher. That dream never left him. By 1841, he was ordained. Father Bosco, 26 years old. June 5th, the eve of Trinity Sunday, Archbishop Franzoni of Turin placed his hands on John's head and spoke the words that changed everything. John Melchiorre Bosco became Don Bosco, a priest forever. The Archbishop sent him to work with Father Joseph Cafasso at the Ecclesiastical Institute. Cafasso was small, deformed from birth, a hunchback. But his spiritual insight was legendary. He saw potential in young Don Bosco that others missed. He took him to the prisons of Turin. The conditions there shocked Don Bosco to his core. Children, so young, 8 years old, 10, 12, chained next to murderers and thieves, sleeping on stone floors, beaten by guards, starving, sick, forgotten, waiting for the gallows or a life of crime. No one cared. No one came. These were the throwaway children of the industrial age. Turin in 1841 was transforming. Factories were opening. Railways were being built. The old agricultural economy was dying. Peasant families flooded into the city looking for work. They found poverty instead. Disease, exploitation. Children as young as 6 worked 12-hour shifts in textile mills. Many were orphaned when parents died of cholera or typhus. These children slept in doorways, under bridges, in abandoned buildings. They stole to eat, formed gangs for protection. The police arrested them. The judges sentenced them. The church mostly ignored them. Don Bosco could not. Every time he visited the prison with Father Cafasso, he saw the same faces getting younger, more desperate, more lost. He made a decision that would define his entire life. He would reach these boys before the prison did, before the gallows did, before hell did. He would go to the streets, to the factories, to the slums, and he would gather them, teach them, love them, save them. On December 8th, 1841, Feast of the Immaculate Conception, Don Bosco was preparing for Mass at the Church of St. Francis of Assisi. The sacristy was cold, dark. He was pulling on his vestments when he heard shouting. A sacristan was yelling at someone outside. Don Bosco stepped out. He saw a ragged boy being thrown out of the church. The boy was dirty, barefoot. His clothes were torn. The sacristan said the boy refused to serve Mass. Did not know how. Was too filthy to enter God's house. Don Bosco heard him crying outside. Something inside the priest broke open. Or maybe it had been waiting to break since he was 2 years old and his own father died. Since he was 9 and the woman in his dream told him to turn wolves into lambs. Since he was a shepherd boy with no education, dreaming of the priesthood. He called the boy back. Come here, do not be afraid. The boy's name was Bartholomew Gorelli, 16 years old, from Asti, a small town 30 miles south of Turin. He had come to the city 3 weeks earlier, looking for work as a mason, found nothing. He was living in a public dormitory, one of those places where 50 people slept on straw thrown on a stone floor, where disease spread like fire, where boys disappeared and no one asked questions. He had wandered into the church because it was warm, because he was lonely, because somewhere deep inside he still remembered his mother praying the rosary before she died. Don Bosco asked him one question. Do you want to learn about God? The boy said yes. That afternoon they prayed a Hail Mary together. 3 days later, Bartholomew brought 9 friends. 3 months later, 25 boys. By summer of 1842, 80 boys. By March 1846, 400. This was the birth of the oratory. They had no building. Don Bosco took them to fields and meadows on Sundays. They played games. They ate lunch. He taught them catechism. He organized a brass band with old instruments he found. The city authorities tried to shut him down 6 times. They moved constantly, kicked out. No one wanted poor boys making noise. In April 1846, a man named Francesco Pinardi leased Don Bosco a rundown shack in the Valdocco district of Turin. It was falling apart. Don Bosco could not afford it, but he signed anyway. It would take 5 years to actually purchase the land. February 19th, 1851. By then, his mother Margaret had sold everything she owned, her house, her furniture, her jewelry. She moved to Valdocco to cook and clean for the boys. They called her Mama Margaret. She gave the last 10 years of her life feeding street children who stole from her and cursed her and slept in her kitchen. By 1852, 36 boys lived at the oratory. By 1854, 115. By 1860, 470. By 1861, 600. Eventually, 800 boys, orphans, thieves, runaways. Don Bosco taught them trades, printing, carpentry, tailoring, shoemaking. He heard their confessions. He stayed up all night when they were sick. He knew each boy by name, and God gave him dreams. Not every night, but enough. Dreams that showed him which boys were in danger. Dreams that revealed the state of their souls. Dreams that predicted their deaths. On February 1st, 1865, Don Bosco told the boys at morning prayers that one of them would die soon. He knew who. He had seen it the night before. On March 16th, 1865, Anthony Ferraris died after receiving the last sacraments. John Bosco, who helped Anthony in his final hours, later gave a sworn testimony. He said Don Bosco predicted many deaths. Every single one came true. During 7 years at the oratory, not one boy died without Don Bosco knowing it first. Bosco swore under oath. Everyone who died under Don Bosco's care went to heaven. Everyone. But then came April 1868. Holy Week. The dreams changed. They became darker, longer, more exhausting. Don Bosco told the boys he felt more tired in the morning than if he had worked through the night. The dreams went on for miserable nights. He could barely stand. His face was pale. His hands shook. On the night of April 17th, 1868, a figure appeared beside his bed. Don Bosco called him the man with the cap. Others thought it was an angel, maybe St. Francis de Sales, maybe a former pupil who had died. The figure said, "Get up and follow me. Tell them what you have seen." Don Bosco tried to stay awake. He sat at his desk until midnight, browsing through books. He did not want to sleep, but exhaustion won. He fell asleep sitting up. Immediately, the figure returned. He led Don Bosco through a desolate plain, a desert. Nothing grew. The air was lifeless. After walking for what felt like hours, they reached a beautiful wide road. It was paved and smooth, lined with hedges covered in roses. Other flowers bloomed everywhere, and the road looked flat, comfortable, easy, but it sloped downward, gently, almost imperceptibly. Don Bosco felt himself moving faster than he should, like wind carried him. Then he realized the boys from the oratory were behind him, all of them. He could see their faces, recognize their names. They were walking the same road, smiling, laughing, running. Suddenly, one boy fell. He hit the ground hard, legs in the air. An invisible force dragged him backward down the slope toward a distant cliff. At the edge of the cliff, smoke rose from a furnace. Another boy fell. Then another. Don Bosco looked closer. Traps everywhere, thin as spider webs. Some on the ground, others at eye level. The boys could not see them. They walked right into the snares. Once caught, they were pulled instantly toward the abyss. Don Bosco asked his guide, "What makes them fall?" The guide said, "Look closer." Don Bosco knelt down. The traps were labeled: pride, disobedience, envy, sixth commandment, theft, gluttony, sloth, anger. Each snare had a name. He watched to see which traps caught the most boys. 3 stood out: impurity, disobedience, pride. These 3 were linked together. They worked as one. But there was another trap, finer than the rest, almost invisible. It caught more boys than any other. The label read, human respect, the fear of what others think, the desire to be liked, to fit in, to avoid standing out. That trap pulled boys down faster than anything else. Don Bosco picked up one of the cords. He pulled. It resisted. He pulled harder. Instead of the cord coming toward him, he felt himself being dragged forward. He followed the cord down toward the cliff. It led to the mouth of a cave. He kept pulling. After a long time, something emerged. A monster, huge, hideous, holding the ends of all the cords in its clawed hands. The devil himself. He clutched the ropes and pulled the moment a boy was caught. His strength was overwhelming. Don Bosco saw him yank boy after boy toward the edge. The guide pointed to knives scattered among the traps. Meditation, spiritual reading, and prayer, confession, devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, devotion to Mary Help of Christians, to St. Joseph, to St. Aloysius Gonzaga. The boys who used these tools cut themselves free. The boys who ignored them fell. Don Bosco kept walking. The road grew steeper. The flowers disappeared. The ground became rocky, full of holes and boulders, harder to walk. The boys were running now, stumbling, falling faster. The slope turned into a ravine. At the bottom stood an enormous building, dark, shadowy, bronze gates at the entrance, walls of stone stretching into the distance. No windows, no light. Heat radiated from it. Even from far away, Don Bosco felt it burning his face. The building seemed ancient, eternal, built not by human hands, but by something older, something that had always been waiting. The guide said nothing, just pointed. Don Bosco looked down the ravine. His heart sank. Boys, dozens of them, running, sliding, falling, all heading toward those bronze gates. Some tried to stop. They dug their heels into the ground. They grabbed at rocks, at branches. Nothing worked. An invisible force pulled them forward, relentless, unstoppable. Then he saw a boy he knew, a boy from the oratory, running down the ravine at full speed. The boy looked terrified. His eyes were wide, bulging, his face twisted in panic. He kept glancing backward as if something chased him. His mouth was open, screaming, but no sound reached Don Bosco, just the sight of pure terror. Don Bosco shouted, "Stop! I will help you!" The boy did not hear, or could not hear. He kept running, faster. His legs moved without his control, like something else was moving them for him. He stumbled over rocks. Each fall only made him slide faster. His hands scraped the ground. His knees hit stones. Blood streaked behind him. He did not slow. Don Bosco tried to run to him. The guide held him back. His grip was iron, immovable. "No," the guide said. "You cannot stop someone fleeing from the wrath of God. Do you think your strength is greater than divine justice? Do you believe you can restrain one who has chosen damnation over salvation? Watch." The boy crashed into the bronze gate with a sound like thunder splitting the sky. The impact should have killed him. Instead, the gate exploded open. Behind it, darkness. And in that darkness, another gate, identical, bronze, massive. The boy's momentum carried him through. He hit the second gate. It flew open, then a third, a fourth, a 10th, a 20th, a 100th. Each impact louder than the last, each gate heavier than the one before. Don Bosco counted. 100 gates, 200, 500. He lost count. The sound became continuous, a roar that never stopped. A cascade of bronze and fire, and at the end of the corridor through all those open gates, Don Bosco saw it. The furnace. Balls of flame shooting into the air like geysers, orange, red, white. Colors that do not exist on Earth. Heat so intense it distorted the air, made it shimmer, made it scream. The boy disappeared into that fire, not consumed, preserved, burning forever. Don Bosco stood frozen. His legs refused to move. His breath came in gasps. He wanted to close his eyes, to turn away, but he could not. The guide's hand on his shoulder kept him facing forward, kept him watching. Then he saw them. 3 more boys from the oratory coming down the same path. He recognized their faces immediately. He knew their names, had heard their confessions, had served them communion, had laughed with them in the courtyard just days before. Now they ran toward the gates with the same terror, the same inability to stop. The first boy hit. The gates exploded open again. The second followed, then the third, each one swallowed by the same corridor, the same fire, the same fate. The sound was like artillery fire, like buildings collapsing, like the end of the world compressed into single moments repeating over and over. The gates remained open, all of them, stretching into the distance. An invitation, a warning, a truth made visible. Don Bosco could see all the way to the furnace now. The path was clear, unobstructed, waiting for the next soul, and the next after that, forever. The guide led him forward. Through the first gate, the heat hit like a wall, solid, crushing. Don Bosco felt his lungs seize. His throat burned. Every breath was agony. Into a long corridor. The walls were bronze, polished, reflecting flames that came from nowhere and everywhere, burning hot. The air was thick, heavy, like breathing liquid fire. Hard to move through, harder to breathe. They passed through more gates, each one darker than the last, each one hotter. Don Bosco's clothes stuck to his skin. Sweat poured down his face, evaporated before it could fall. His eyes burned. His skin felt like it was blistering. And this was just the entrance, just the first of 1,000 walls. The guide kept walking. Don Bosco followed. He had no choice. Finally they reached a courtyard, vast, open. But the sky above was not sky. It was smoke, thick black smoke that blotted out everything. No stars, no heaven, just endless darkness pressing down. Don Bosco looked up. He could see words carved into the stone above the entrance. The letters glowed orange like heated metal. Their worm shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched. Isaiah 66:24. The words themselves seemed to burn, to pulse, to breathe with heat. The courtyard was filled with souls, hundreds, maybe thousands. Don Bosco could not count them all. Boys, young men, some he knew from the oratory. Most he had never seen. They stood in twisted positions, bodies bent, limbs frozen mid-motion. Some had arms raised, as if trying to ward off a blow that never stopped coming. Others had hands covering their faces, fingers spread, eyes wide between them, staring at something only they could see. One boy stood with his right hand and left foot raised in the air, balanced impossibly. His face was contorted in a scream that never ended, his mouth wide open, tongue visible, throat exposed. The scream was there, eternal but silent. Another boy was bent almost double, his head nearly touching the floor. His spine twisted at an angle that should have broken him, but he could not fall further, could not straighten, frozen in that exact moment of collapse. Others balanced on one foot or one hand, or lay on their backs with legs raised, or curled on their sides with arms wrapped around nothing, or knelt with hands clutching their hair, pulling, tearing, ripping, forever, like statues cast in bronze but made of flesh that still felt everything, still burned, still suffered, but could not move, could not adjust, could not find even a moment of relief. They glowed orange like burning coals pulled from a fire. Their skin pulsed with heat, waves of it radiating off them. Don Bosco could feel it from 10 feet away, 20 feet, across the entire courtyard, the heat of souls in torment, the heat of justice made visible. They did not move, not a finger, not an eyelid, frozen forever in the position they fell, the position they chose. Don Bosco tried to speak to them. He walked closer to one he recognized, a boy who had lived at Valdaco for 2 years, who had sung in the choir, who had learned printing in the workshop. He whispered the boy's name. Nothing. He said it louder. Still nothing. The boy's eyes stared straight ahead, fixed on eternity, seeing something Don Bosco could not see, locked in a moment that would never end. No one looked at him. No one turned. No one acknowledged his presence. They were there, but not there. Existing, but not living. Conscious, but not able to respond. The guide stood beside Don Bosco. His voice was quiet, sad. The damned are totally deprived of freedom. They fell into hell in that position. They will remain in that position forever, as it is written in Ecclesiastes 11:3. In what place soever it shall fall, there shall it be. No motion, no change, no hope of anything different. Just this. Eternally this. The guide led him to another hall, and the walls here were different, crystal, transparent, clear. Through them, Don Bosco could see more souls, but these ones moved. They paced back and forth. 3 steps, turn, 3 steps, turn, over and over. The same pattern repeated infinitely. Others stood beating their chests, pounding, their fists rising and falling in rhythm, never stopping, never tiring, just endless violence against themselves. Some tore at their clothes, ripping fabric that reformed instantly. Others pulled their hair, great handfuls coming loose, growing back, being pulled again. The cycle never broken. Some stood with their hands raised toward heaven, or what should have been heaven, but there was only smoke, only darkness. Their mouths moved, forming words, prayers maybe, or curses, or both. But nothing changed, no answer came, no relief arrived. Their faces were twisted in rage and despair mixed together, anger at God, anger at themselves, anger at the saints who warned them, anger at the church that taught them, anger at Mary who called them, anger at everything and everyone except the sin that brought them there. Because to acknowledge the sin would be to acknowledge they chose this, and pride would not allow even that small truth. They looked through the crystal. Their eyes found Don Bosco. Recognition flashed across their faces. Some had been his boys, had eaten at his table, had slept in his house, had prayed with him in the chapel. Now they looked at him with pure hatred, with envy that burned hotter than the flames. They had once mocked the good, laughed at holiness, scorned devotion, made fun of boys who prayed, who went to confession, who loved Mary. Now they saw the good in paradise, and they could not bear it, could not endure the sight, could not accept that they had chosen differently and lost everything. Don Bosco pressed his ear to the crystal. Screams poured through, sobs, blasphemies, curses against the saints, against Mary, against God, a tumult of voices all screaming at once. The guide said, when they recall the happy lot of their good companions, they are forced to admit we fools thought their life was madness. We mocked them. Now they are numbered among the children of God, and we are here. We have erred from the way of truth. The light of justice did not shine on us. We walked the way of iniquity and destruction. The guide took Don Bosco lower, into a cavern beneath the hall. Above the entrance were the same words, "Their worm shall not die, and their fire shall not be quenched." Inside, Don Bosco saw boys covered in worms and vermin. The creatures gnawed at their eyes, their hearts, their hands, their legs, their entire bodies. The boys could not move, could not fight back. Helpless. Don Bosco saw boys who had been his pupils, boys who had lived at the oratory, boys who had received First Communion from his hands. The guide said, "Look at what torments them most. It is not the fire, it is not the worms. It is the memory. They remember every unforgiven sin, every grace they rejected, every mass they skipped, every confession they avoided. They remember the Virgin Mary calling them back. They remember you warning them. They remember making good resolutions and breaking them. Hell is paved with good intentions. They remember how easy it would have been to be saved. One confession, one Hail Mary, one moment of sorrow, and now it is too late, forever. That is the worst torment, the knowledge that they could have chosen differently, and they did not. And now there is no second chance, no appeal, no mercy, only justice." Don Bosco could barely stand. His legs shook, his heart pounded. He begged the guide, "Please take me out of here. I have seen enough." The guide said, "Yes, you have seen. Now you must remember. You must tell them." He led Don Bosco back through the corridor, through the gates, back toward the entrance. But as they reached the last bronze gate, the guide stopped. He turned to Don Bosco. He said, "Now that you have seen what others suffer, you too must experience a touch of hell." "No, no," Don Bosco cried. He tried to pull away. The guide held his arm. "Do not be afraid," the guide said. "Just one touch. So you can say you have both seen and touched the walls of eternal suffering. So you understand what the last wall must be like if the first is so unendurable. There are 1,000 walls between this and the real fire of hell." Don Bosco resisted. The guide seized his hand, forced it open, pressed it against the stone wall. The pain was indescribable, burning beyond anything he had ever felt. Every nerve on fire. Don Bosco screamed. He leaped backward. He found himself sitting up in bed. His hand was stinging. He kept rubbing it to ease the pain. When he woke that morning, his hand was swollen. Later, the skin on his palm peeled off. The touch had been so real that his body bore the mark. Days later, the swelling remained. Weeks later, he still remembered the burning sensation. On Sunday night, May 3rd, 1868, Feast of St. Joseph, Don Bosco gathered all the boys of the oratory. He told them the dream. He spoke for hours. He described every detail: the road, the traps, the boys falling, the gates, the fire, the frozen souls, the crystal walls, the worms, the burning touch. The boys listened in complete silence. Some wept, some trembled. Some made resolutions on the spot to go to confession immediately. Don Bosco told them, "I have not described these things in all their horror as I saw them and as they impressed me. I have tried not to frighten you too much. Even so, I am exhausted from telling you, but you must understand. Our Lord always portrayed hell in symbols, because if he described it as it really is, we would not understand. No mortal can comprehend these things. The Lord knows them, and he reveals them to whomever he wills." He said, "The most dangerous trap is human respect, the fear of standing out, of being different, of being mocked for praying, for going to Mass, for avoiding sin. That trap pulls more souls to hell than any other. You must cut yourself free with the knife of courage. With devotion to Mary, with frequent confession, with love for the Eucharist, these are your weapons." He said, "Pride, disobedience, and impurity work together. They are linked. Where you find one, you find the others. Guard against them with all your strength. Meditate, read spiritual books, pray the rosary, receive the sacraments. Do not let a day pass without these things." He said, "Remember that hell is forever. There is no time limit, no parole, no second chance. The moment you die in mortal sin, you fall, and you remain in the position you fell, forever. The fire does not consume, but it burns without end. The worms do not kill, but they devour without stop. And worst of all, you remember. You remember how easily you could have been saved, and that memory is more terrible than the flames." John Bosco, who heard that talk and lived at the oratory for 7 years, later testified under oath. He said, "Don Bosco told us many other dreams concerning boys' deaths. We believed them to be true prophecies. We still do, because unfailingly they came true. During the 7 years I lived at the oratory, not a boy died without Don Bosco predicting his death. We were also convinced that whoever died there under his care and assistance surely went to heaven. Every single one. After that night, the confessional lines at Valdaco stretched for hours. Boys waited through the night to confess. Don Bosco heard confessions until he could barely speak. He canceled classes, canceled meals, just confessions. For days, some boys who had not been to confession in years finally came. Some who had been hiding grave sins finally spoke. The vision had done what years of preaching could not. It broke through. Don Bosco never forgot that night. Neither did the boys who heard him. For the rest of his life, whenever a boy at the oratory started sliding towards sin, Don Bosco would take him aside. He would remind him of the dream, the traps, the gates, the frozen souls, and almost always, the boy would turn back. In 1859, Don Bosco founded the Society of St. Francis de Sales, the Salesians, to continue the work after he died. In 1864, the cornerstone of the Basilica of Mary Help of Christians was laid at Valdocco. In 1872, he founded the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians, the Salesian Sisters. In 1875, the first 10 Salesians left for missions in South America. By the time Don Bosco died on January 31st, 1888, at age 72, the Salesian Society had 250 houses in all parts of the world. They contained 130,000 children. 18,000 finished apprentices went out each year. 3,000 vocations had come from his oratory. Boys who became priests, brothers, missionaries, saints. Don Bosco died in his small room at Valdocco, exhausted from work, surrounded by his Salesians. His last words were, "Promote devotion to Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament and to Mary Help of Christians, and you will see what miracles are worked. Help the poor children, the sick, the elderly, and the needy, and you will be granted great blessings and help from God. I await you all in paradise." His funeral was attended by thousands. Crowds lined the streets of Turin. The city that once threw his boys out of every building now mourned the man who saved them. Pope Pius XI, who had known Don Bosco personally, pushed his cause forward. Don Bosco was beatified on June 2nd, 1929, canonized on April 1st, 1934, declared patron saint of Catholic publishers in 1949, Saint John Bosco, father and teacher of youth. But the dream of April 17th, 1868 remained. Documented, preserved, read by generations of Salesians, taught in their seminaries, shared with boys in their oratories around the world. The vision that exhausted a saint, the touch that burned his hand, the truth that saved thousands of souls. Because here is what most people miss. Don Bosco did not see those boys actually in hell. They were still alive, walking around Turin, living at the oratory, playing in the courtyard. The vision showed where they were heading, not where they had arrived. It was a warning, a chance to turn back, to cut the cords, to avoid the traps. And most of them did. That is the point of the vision. Not to terrify, not to condemn, but to wake up, to see the reality of sin, to understand that every choice matters, every moment counts. Every grace rejected brings you closer to the edge. And once you fall, there is no climbing back. Don Bosco spent 50 years pulling boys back from that edge, one by one, confession by confession, Hail Mary by Hail Mary. He knew what awaited them if he failed. He had seen it. He had touched it. He bore the scar on his hand as proof, and that knowledge drove him to work until his body gave out. The dream was not fiction. John Bosco swore it under oath. The boys who heard it that night testified to its power. The physical evidence remained on Don Bosco's hand for days. Pope Pius IX himself ordered Don Bosco to write down all his dreams for the encouragement of the congregation. These were not bedtime stories. They were prophetic visions, given by God, documented by the Church, preserved for a reason, and that reason is simple. Hell is real. The traps are real. The cords are real. The devil is real. He pulls, he waits, he wants you. And if you ignore the warnings, if you cut yourself off from grace, if you choose sin over God, you will fall. And the position you fall in is the position you remain, forever. But here is the other side. The knives are real too. Confession, communion, Mary, prayer, devotion, these cut you free. No matter how tightly the cords bind you, no matter how close you are to the edge. One sincere confession can sever every trap. One Hail Mary offered with love can pull you back from the abyss. One moment of true sorrow can change your eternity. Don Bosco proved it. 3,000 boys from his oratory became priests and brothers. Hundreds became saints. Dominic Savio, 14 years old, died in holiness in 1857. Michael Rua, Don Bosco's successor, first rector major of the Salesians, beatified in 1972. Francis Basuco, shepherd boy, mystic, died at age 14 in 1864. Don Bosco wrote his biography, called him a model of innocence. These boys walked the same road Don Bosco saw in his vision. They saw the same traps. They felt the same pull, but they used the knives. They cut themselves free. They chose differently. And instead of falling into the furnace, they rose into the light. That is what Don Bosco wanted. Not fear, but hope. Not despair, but action. The vision of April 17th, 1868 remains one of the most detailed descriptions of hell ever recorded by a canonized saint. More detailed than the visions of Saint Faustina, more visceral than the children of Fatima, more physical than Teresa of Avila. Don Bosco not only saw hell, he felt it. His hand proved it. And the question is not whether you believe it, The question is whether you will learn from it, whether you will see the traps in your own life, whether you will recognize the cords pulling you toward the edge, whether you will use the knives God has given you to cut yourself free, whether you will take the warning seriously while there is still time. Because that is what Don Bosco saw in that courtyard of frozen souls. Boys who had been warned, boys who had ignored the warnings, boys who thought they had time, boys who did not. And now they stand there, forever, in the position they fell, with the full knowledge that they could have chosen differently, and they did not. In 1868, in a small room at Valdoco, Don Bosco woke with his hands swollen and his soul shaken. Days later, the skin on his palm peeled away, leaving a mark that would last for weeks as a tangible reminder of the intangible truth he had been shown.